Hello, I'm Wendy. In this video I paint some experimental backgrounds in watercolour with magnolia blossom as a subject. I've used clingfilm in the background washes and also on the flowers to produce an experimental semi-abstract painting. The video follows on from my last one, which is an in-depth step-by-step tutorial painting magnolia blossom in watercolour. You might want to check that out, and there's a link above and also in the description box below. Now this little picture is going to be quite experimental. It's going to be sort of semi-abstract, I hope, when I finished it. I was wondering whether to do just one big flower or whether to put the two smaller ones on. The drawing is really going to serve just as a guide because I'm going to be putting cling film over the picture, and that's going to spread the paint around, so we're not going to be too bothered about getting anything too accurate and tidy at the moment. But this time I'm going to start with the flower, so instead of doing the background first, I'm going to start with the flower, and I'm going to use the cobalt violet and the cobalt blue again, and I'm going to put some paint on just to try and to stand for shadow and just to give the flower some form. I'm going to work as I did before. I want to leave quite a lot of white on this, so I've got to be careful that I don't cover all the white up with it. So again, I'm hoping that we're going to keep the form, and I'll continue putting some of these shadows on. I think I should make it a little bit darker, because what happens when you put cling film on, it spreads the paint out, and you can be quite disappointed with the final picture because it's a lot paler than you wanted it to be. So we'll see, we'll try and make it a little bit darker in places. Might be too dark, put a bit there. So I'm not thinking too much about where I'm putting the colours, except, as I said, to keep the form of the flower, because this is going to be really, really experimental. I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully something nice. I'm keeping the edges soft, more or less. And then, since I decided to do these, we'll put a little bit on here. But that's the main flower, so these need to sort of take a background place and not be as prominent. But we need to get some of that pink on there, I think. And then what I'm going to do when I've done this, I'm going to put some cling film on it, and I'm going to leave the cling film on I don't know, for quite a long time, so I'm just softening these edges a little bit here till I think it's sort of how I want it, I think, tone-wise, tonally. Let's try that, and then I'll put the cling film on. Right, so I've got this ready, and I'm going to crumple it up a bit so that we get some shapes going on in here. What we want to try and do is keep those colours in the same sort of area, but get patterns in them from the cling film. So if I hold that up, you might be able to see it a little bit better. See what I mean about the colours going paler? Never mind. If they're too pale, I'll have to do another one. It's all good fun. I like doing this. If I do it again, I'll change the colours. But I'll leave it now for a little while, just for those to settle and dry. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work Probably work the leaves next and the branches. So I'm taking the cling film off, and we've got some quite interesting shapes in there, haven't we? So I think what I'll do next is do the leaves. So I'm going to use two colours here. So we're going to use the yellow that we used before, and some green, and I'm going to do a similar thing. So what I need to do on here is get some different tones going of green, so that when the cling film goes on, it's going to spread out the colour and they're going to mix, but they're not going to all look the same and all look too uniform. That's my aim. And again, I'm not too worried about going outside lines. I'm going to put a bit of burnt sienna on as well, as we did before. So I'm going to scrumple the cling film up again and see what happens with the leaves, with the bits on the bud. Oh, I can see I missed a bit. And then we're going to leave that at that stage to dry again. When that's dry, what I'm going to do is put the background on and then put more cling film on the background, I think. Or maybe I'll just put some salt on. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. What I'm going to do now is work in a similar way to what we did before, which is painting around these shapes and dropping some colours in. I've used some green and I'm going to use a strong grey, particularly around the white areas. And the grey is made from burnt sienna and cobalt, as we did before. Ring the changes a little bit with it. I think I might go round where the branch is as well. I just thought I would use the colours, not change the palette, but use the colours that we've been using. And I suppose we could drop a little bit of purple in as well. Wouldn't come amiss, would it? Or the cobalt violet. Again, we've got to keep this nice and wet. I think I might just leave a little bit of white around some of these leaves. If you get too many colours in a painting like this, it's not going to look very good. It's going to look a little bit too bitty, I think. Try and keep things a little bit samey regarding the palette. I don't want to keep the same tone though, so I might go a bit lighter on this side. I think if you get the background all the same tone, then it can look boring. So I'll try and make it a little bit lighter over here. Who knows? Who knows what will happen, because I think I'm going to put some more cling film on here as well. Got this nice strong dark around the main flower. I hope it doesn't run into the flower too much when I put the cling film on. I don't want these branches to be too thick. I think it's best to cover the paper. You don't want to leave lots of white because then it will compete with this main central flower, which you don't want. So I think we'll kill the white, remembering to match the colours on either side of things. Got to get some nice darks around the lights for them to stand out. Just trying to get a balance really. I don't know about that. I think that might be okay. So I think what I'm going to do is put a little bit of salt in places where I want it to be light, because the salt will soak up the paint, so I'm not going to put it in the really dark areas. And then I'm going to put some more cling film on, believe it or not. Don't want too many shapes around the edges, so try and keep the shapes sort of in the middle. I don't want to spread these darks around too much either. So we'll see, it is going onto the leaf. I might have to do a little bit of softening or something there, pulling out maybe. So we'll see what that looks like. I've left this little picture a day, and I've left the cling film on overnight, which is quite a good idea really, because it makes sure that the paint is all dry. So let's see what we've got here. It's quite interesting. I think what I'm going to do is rub out the pencil lines. Makes a heck of a difference. It looks much better. It looking a bit abstracty, which is what I wanted. Maybe not quite abstracty enough, I don't know. You've got to live with what you get. You can have a big plan in your mind for what you want to paint, and it doesn't turn out, it very rarely turns out according to that plan, but so you've got to work around your picture and decide what to do next. So that's what I'll do. I'll think for a minute and mix up some paint for the twiggy bits. Now at this stage I think it would be a good idea to put a mount around it. This is a 12 by 10 mount. It's quite a big aperture here. I don't like that. I think it needs something a bit smaller. So I've got a smaller aperture here. I think that's going to be better. That gives you some idea of what you might want to do and what the picture's going to look like. I quite like the different tones in this background, because sometimes when I do these pictures, the background sort of behind the flowers all looks very samey in the same tone. But this is looking nice because it's got the darker bits around the flower and then the lighter bits here, so I quite like that. So I'm mixing up some colours here for the twiggy bits. I've got some burnt sienna on its own, and here I'm mixing up a dark, and I'm using some of the burnt sienna and some of the cobalt. And I've probably said it before, but if you mix something like burnt sienna or burnt umber with a blue, you could use ultramarine, you could use cobalt. Sometimes you can fall into the trap of adding too much blue to the mix, and it goes a very dark sort of black colour, and I see this quite often in paintings, and it's just got no colour to it at all, and it's very dead. Now, to try and get away from that, trying to avoid that, what I do sometimes, and what I'm doing here, is putting some burnt sienna, putting some of my blue, and then adding a little bit of red. I've got light red in this case, but it doesn't really matter. That's a bit too much on the red side, so you've got to fiddle around a bit. Well, it's not fiddling, it's mixing. Mixing quite often takes a longer time than actually painting. So with these three colours, you then want to mix up a dark that is nice and dark, but hasn't got that sort of black dead look to it. So I think that's quite a good tip for you to remember, and myself. So we'll make a bit of a start on here. Don't want to be too particular with it because the rest of it is quite abstracty. I don't want to do these too detailed. So this is some of the dark going on the bottom. A bit more brown in it even, I think. See what it's going to look like. So I don't want to do too much. But I don't want the branches to be too light and too white, because if I do that they'll compete with the white flowers, which is the centre of interest on this picture. There we go. I think I'm going to leave it at that. If you find it easier, then just use the single flower as I did in these three paintings. Not necessarily magnolia, use a flower of your choice. And don't be afraid of being experimental and creative sometimes when it comes to your artwork. It will do you an awful lot of good and give you a lot more confidence when it comes to painting in watercolour.